My healthy habits.
Surprise is the only emotion that requires an interpretation.
Wherever we go.
It's a real choice.
We go together.
We can change
This is
that.
what life teaches.
Thank you. Johnny told me he first thought about a healing garden when he looked out his prison window and all he could see was another wall. He couldn't see sky or grass, nothing natural at all, only concrete. There are 2.3 million people like Johnny locked up in state prisons, federal prisons, local jails, juvenile correctional facilities, civil commitment centers, Indian country jails, military prisons, territorial prisons. We are really creative about all the different ways we lock people up. And that 2.3 million number is just a single snapshot in time. If you add up all the people who are incarcerated over the course of a year, you're looking at more than 11 million people. And that is the highest rate of incarceration in the world. And it has a profound effect, not just on people who are incarcerated, but also their children, who are 6 times more likely to experience incarceration themselves. We have so many people incarcerated because we have pursued a set of aggressive punishment strategies. 3 strikes and you're outlaws, mandatory minimums, and eliminating probation and parole. As a country, we think we can solve a whole host of social problems with punishment. Now, I understand the desire for punishment. When a violent crime is committed, victims and their families, even whole communities, feel the effects. And those trauma effects can be very long-lasting. The problem is, punishment doesn't work the way we think it does. We think that punishment and deprivation works to deter crime, but we're not understanding the myriad sources of crime. Humans get acclimated to deprivation and violence. Our emotions shut down. We go into survival mode. It's very hard to feel empathy when so little compassion is shown to you. And when you experience the world as a bleak and hostile place, then you tend to act accordingly. Now, the idea that the world is hostile is something most prisoners understand very well. Many of them come to prison having been victims of childhood trauma or other violence themselves. And so that treatment just reinforces their worldview. And where there's no hope, there's no change. Our punishment system doesn't work the way we think it does, but we can change that. In fact, we need to change that. Because right now, despite those longer sentences, more than 90% of prisoners will get out and return to our communities. And if all we've done is made them more habituated to violence, more traumatized, and made it harder to develop and maintain healthy relationships, then we're not safer. Instead of punishment, we need transformative justice. Transformative justice understands the potential for human growth. No one is expendable. Certainly not whole populations, the poor Americans and people of color who are overwhelmingly represented in prison. Transformative justice does require accountability when a crime is committed, but it understands that you can't fully know the harms that you've created if you don't have a well-developed sense of empathy and human connection. Transformative justice recognizes that if you feel you've been forsaken and you don't have a sense of belonging to a family or a community or a culture, then you feel lost. And like your actions, good or bad, just don't matter. And transformative justice understands that we need to give people the possibility for making amends, because that is part of the process of transformation and a more important one than just punishment. Our punishment system doesn't work the way we think it does, but we can change it. In fact, many people are working to change that. The Healing Garden Project at the Oregon State Penitentiary represents transformative justice principles in action. It's a prisoner-led initiative. Johnny had this vision. He was missing nature, and he really wanted to build a koi pond. So he started to talk to a fellow prisoner, Toshio, who is president of the Asian Pacific Family Club, an ethnically diverse cultural club whose motto is diminishing boundaries and overcoming differences. Together, Johnny and Toshio reached out to the predominantly white veterans group in prison and to veterans on the OSP staff about building a garden around the Veterans Memorial. The veterans became very enthusiastic and supported this idea. Together, Johnny and the core team, Toshio and Walt, Jimmy and Scott and Kevin, were animated by this desire to bring a bit of beauty into prison and to provide a respite for prisoners from the bleak landscape. And they were encouraged in this endeavor by their activities director, Patrice Lance, who allowed the men to do internet research on Japanese gardens. Increasingly, the men saw the possibilities not just of transforming the landscape, but in transforming themselves. But they didn't know how they were really going to be able to pull this off. It seemed like a monumental task to get through all the hurdles of prison administration approval and start fundraising for this project. But they were incredibly driven, very determined to make a positive mark on their world and to not be known by the worst thing they'd ever done in their lives. Through a fortunate connection, they were able to get Hoichi Kurisu, renowned landscape architect, to create and donate the garden design. Mr. Kurisu came to OSP and he didn't just see concrete and barbed wire. He noticed that little tiny green plants grew in the cracks in the asphalt, and he told the men that this is what a garden can do to a hardened heart. And Mr. Kurisu has designed a garden with deliberate care. It starts with a gate that symbolizes a break in the physical and the mental space, and you have to bow your head to get through the gate, an act of humility. Next, visitors walk on stepping stones, carefully transferring your weight from one step to the other, focusing the mind on what is directly ahead. And the path takes you on a bridge that goes over water, finally to a lotus pond. The lotus flower is revered for its beautiful purity, though it grows from the mud in murky waters. And it symbolizes the idea that no matter where you come from, you're capable of generating great beauty. Visitors end at the sandstone garden that is raked in the shape of a crescent moon and sun, symbolizing the universe. You can sit down on a bench and put down your ego, as Mr. Kurisu would say, and contemplate your place among the cosmos. The healing garden is a new vision for what we can do in prison when we recognize that punishment doesn't work the way we think it does, but instead we encourage transformative justice. The healing garden will not just be a place of safe reflection and quiet contemplation. In fact, it has already given the men a sense of purpose because it has been an incredible initiative involving fundraising, soon construction of the garden, and there's a whole plan for education projects on meditation and maintenance of the physical space. Just last month when I saw Johnny, he and other members of the Asian Pacific Family Club had just participated in a new educational program inspired by the garden, an ikebana class on the Japanese art of flower arranging. Yes, they're flower arranging in prison. And Johnny described it to me fundamentally as a meditation on beauty. Importantly, the garden also has broken down barriers between the prison and community. I teach a class at OSP that is half Willamette University students and half prisoners. And Johnny showed up at the beginning of class. That's how I first met him, when the garden was just a koi pond idea. But he showed up at the beginning of class and asked me if I would come to a presentation about the garden. He had just gotten permission from Superintendent Brandon Kelly to fundraise for the project. Superintendent Kelly told the men that they could build the garden if they could raise all the funds for it so that no taxpayer money was spent on the project. From that first presentation, the Asian Pacific Family Club has expanded its community partners, from college professors to plant and tree growers. The community partners now include a whole host of Japanese musicians, a National Korean American Association called Nakisak, a 90-plus-year-old philanthropist, a Unitarian church, the Spirit Mountain Fund, the Social Justice Initiative, Meyer Memorial Trust, and the Oregon Community Foundation, and many individuals doing their part. When I first heard the garden presentation, the whole project seemed quite overwhelming and, in fact, very improbable. But the men's enthusiasm and hopefulness was inspiring to me, so I told them I would do what I could do. And I've been joined by a whole network of people doing what they can do. And now there are the funds to start building the Healing Garden this March. Thanks. When we recognize that punishment doesn't work the way we think it does, we can change that. We all can play a role in resisting the culture of punishment and ending mass incarceration. It starts with believing in the possibility of redemption and in supporting policies and projects like the Healing Garden that encourage transformative justice. Thank you.